La dernière année a été marquée par des événements climatiques extrêmes qui se sont succédés à un rythme effréné. Cette année, les productrices et producteurs ont subi autant la sécheresse que les inondations à des niveaux jamais vus auparavant. When we look back at the state of the agriculture sector in 2021, we can say this year has been marked by extreme climate change weather events. That includes the worst drought in 60 years in Western Canada and the devastating of atmospheric rivers in British Columbia. Firstly, I want to thank all industrial leaders for your dedication and tireless support for the sector during these challenging times. Over the past few weeks, I have visited farmers devastated by the drought on the prairies and by flooding in British Columbia. It is heartbreaking to hear the stories of great loss and hardships experienced by these farmers. But more than anything, it is inspiring to see the great spirit of determination to rebuild. Malgré les défis, c'est la détermination dont nos productrices et producteurs font preuve, leur grande résilience, leur courage face à l'adversité, qui font en sorte que notre secteur agricole et agroalimentaire est parmi les meilleurs au monde. Nos agricultrices et agriculteurs démontrent au quotidien qu'ils peuvent assurer la sécurité alimentaire des Canadiens et des Canadiennes malgré les défis qui se présentent à eux. Et leur solidarité, leur esprit de communauté en temps incertain ne sont pas étrangers à ces réalisations. At times like this, farmers and all Canadians have been pulling together and helping their neighbors in need. That spirit of solidarity is what the Hay West initiative is all about. Almost 20 years ago, producers from across Canada united to help the Western neighbors during a severe drought. Together, they organized rail shipments of hay from Eastern Canada to farmers across the West. Hay West became an icon of Canadian community spirit. That spirit still runs strong in our rural communities today. The extreme drought conditions during the summer created significant hay shortages. Many livestock farmers and ranchers have struggled to secure enough hay to feed their animals. The relaunch of Hay West 2021 by the Canadian Federation of Agriculture is helping to meet that need. Since August, Hay West has shipped 5.6 million pounds of hay from the Maritimes, Quebec, and Ontario to farmers in need. L'initiative Hay West est un exemple de la solidarité qui unit les productrices et les producteurs de tout le Canada. Alors que ceux de l'Ouest ont subi cet été une sécheresse extrême qui a entraîné une importante pénurie de foin, ceux de l'Est ont eu de très bons niveaux de production. Ainsi, de l'Est vers l'Ouest, avec l'aide de la Fédération canadienne de l'agriculture, les agriculteurs et les agricultrices partagent leurs récoltes. Depuis le mois d'août, ce sont plus de 5,6 millions de livres de foin qui ont traversé le Canada. Cette initiative de solidarité entraîne des coûts importants liés au transport du foin sur de si grandes distances. Through Hay West, CFA has connected farmers like Roger Parkinson in western New Brunswick, who had a surplus of hay, with livestock producers like Lisa Ains from Saskatchewan, who was about to sell her breeding herd. Without the Hay West program, Lisa doesn't know what she would have done over the winter. The hay she received helps her get to the next season. The number of inspiring stories of solidarity like this grows weekly as more farmers are helped with their feed needs. Of course, the cost of shipping the hay add up quickly. That's why the Government of Canada is investing $4 million to help CFA with the costs of transporting hay under the program. In late September, our government stepped up to support CFA with an investment of $1 million towards Hay West, and as of today, we are adding another $3 million to get more hay across the country to help farmers feed their animals through the winter. À la fin septembre, le gouvernement du Canada a donné son appui à l'initiative Hay West en investissant un premier million de dollars pour aider la Fédération canadienne de l'agriculture à appuyer les coûts de transport du foin. Aujourd'hui, nous ajoutons 3 millions de dollars pour transporter encore plus de foin de l'Est vers l'Ouest et nourrir les animaux au cours des mois d'hiver. Il s'agit donc d'un investissement de 4 millions de dollars jusqu'à maintenant pour appuyer l'initiative de solidarité pan-canadienne et aider les producteurs et productrices de l'Ouest qui ont souffert de la sécheresse pour nourrir leurs animaux durant l'hiver. L'initiative Hay West n'est qu'une partie des efforts que nous déployons pour aider les producteurs et productrices touchés par la grave sécheresse. Our support for Hay West is just one way we are helping farmers bounce back from the impacts of extreme weather. Across the West and northwestern Ontario, the federal government and provinces acted rapidly to roll out $825 million of joint agri-recovery disaster relief funds to help farmers cover the extra costs they faced. We improved the farmer income supports under the Agri-Stability Program and, in the Prairie's, adjusted agri-insurance so crops ruined by drought could be used for animal feed. For BC, we are working closely with the province to get the emergency support they need and are fast-tracking an agri-recovery disaster relief package to be rolled out in the coming weeks. When provinces and the federal government collaborate, we can make things happen fast for producers. All of these are short-term supports to help farmers weather the storm. As we respond to catastrophe, now we must also look to the long term. Les événements climatiques extrêmes comme ceux que nous avons vécus cet été ajoutent beaucoup de stress et d'incertitude dans la vie des productrices et producteurs agricoles. Ils vont probablement être de plus en plus fréquents au cours des prochaines années. Et notre gouvernement est fermement engagé à ce que le Canada demeure un leader en agriculture durable et souhaite continuer d'appuyer les producteurs et productrices à accélérer et multiplier l'adoption de pratiques durables et l'acquisition de technologies propres. Nous les aiderons à améliorer leur résilience face au changement climatique et en même temps à contribuer à l'atteinte de nos objectifs de réduction des émissions de gaz à effet de serre. Farmers have made great gains in sustainable agriculture, and now is the time to double down to improve our resilience to the effects of climate change and contribute to our emission reduction goals. This is what consumers are asking for and where our trading partners are going. This year, our government launched over $500 million in new programming to help farmers adopt sustainable practices and clean technologies. And together with the provinces and territories, we are shaping the next 5-year, multi-billion-dollar agricultural policy framework with a shared vision that will prioritize the sustainability of the sector. We will not rest until our farmers are back on their feet. Once again, I want to thank Mary and everyone at the CFA for spearheading Hay West 2021. In this season of giving, I invite all Canadians to include farmers and our food industry in their thoughts and well wishes. With everyone pulling together, our agriculture and agri-food sector will continue to grow and deliver our world-class food to Canadians and consumers around the globe. C'est maintenant plus que jamais l'occasion idéale d'offrir à nos proches des produits qui viennent d'ici. Merci.
Operator, do we have questions on the phone?
I will now turn the floor to Mary
okay.
Robinson,
Hold on,
President of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture. Mary?
Thank you, Minister. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. First, I want to thank Minister Bibeau and the Government of Canada for today's announcement regarding the $4 million contribution to CFA's Hay West 2021 initiative to support our Western producers impacted by this year's severe drought. As I'm sure you all know, the drought in Western Canada made it pretty much impossible for prairie farmers to grow enough feed to provide their livestock as they normally would. They need that feed now. They need it throughout the rest of winter, and they need it into spring when they can hopefully turn livestock out to pasture. This has created some extremely difficult circumstances for farmers, as well as potential animal welfare crises. Without hay to feed livestock, farmers are forced to consider culling animals early. As herds take years to build up, this culling has the very likely potential to have long-term effects on Canada's food production, especially our beef production. I cannot imagine the stress and worry being carried by these farmers as they not only watch their crops dry up this summer, but they've lost the ability to feed their animals that they've cared for and raised for years, and they have to face the fact there are very few options as to how they can improve their situation. CFA developed the Hay West 2021 initiative in response to this crisis. Farmers in central and eastern Canada have been lucky enough to have a very productive hay growing season, and we're proud to say that hundreds of farmers have signed up to ship their hay west to help farmers feed their cattle. We thank each and every one of those farmers for their support and generosity. As of today, CFA has shipped more than 5.5 million pounds of hay west, feeding approximately 17,000 head of cattle in over 75 farms. We've been fortunate enough to receive corporate donations from Farm Credit Canada, the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, the Government of Prince Edward Island, and CN Rail. This money goes entirely toward covering the shipping costs of sending hay west. Apart from these donations, we are also planning to talk about the funding that the Canadian government is announcing today, bringing their total contributions to the program to $4 million. We appreciate today's announcement. This funding is a clear signal from government that it supports this important initiative. These funds will help avert disaster for a few months, but we will need more hay, and we will need to continue into spring to keep Western herds viable and avoid culling valuable breeding stock. Initially, CFA had requested $6 million from government. We now know both the demand and potential supply of hay greatly exceed what $6 million would allow us to transport. As of right now, CFA has not shipped any hay in almost a month due to a break in funding. We know the valuable breeding stock that it is being culled now due to both a lack of hay in the immediate as well as supply uncertainty through to spring. We also know that those eastern farmers who baled and stockpiled extra hay to ship to Western Canadian farms will have to consider selling that hay elsewhere, potentially to the US, because we cannot give them a firm commitment that we will be able to move it for them. And we hope that's changed a bit today. Today's announcement will certainly help alleviate much of the immediate uncertainty and some of the stress farmers are facing. It would be incorrect to imply that Hay West 2021 can resolve this issue entirely. The deficit of hay in the West is huge, estimated to be 4 million ton, not pounds. These shipments are mitigating the effects. Every shipment is saving animals and saving farm families' livelihoods. The more certainty and predictability we can give farmers on both ends of these shipments, the better they will be able to prepare and help minimize the long-term impacts of this feed shortage on the Canadian beef sector. The more funding we secure, the more breeding stock we can help maintain, and the faster we will all recover from this. And that leads me to my call to action today. CFA is actively seeking more corporate and private donations from any interested parties. Every dollar donated will go towards covering the shipping costs of sending more hay, more much-needed hay, west. We currently have received a donation of $125,000 from CN Rail, and they've agreed to match any further donations up to an extra $125,000. That means that right now, any donation will effectively double its impact immediately. While we know that today's contribution will greatly assist our Western producers, We will still be looking to government in the months ahead to ensure we can continue to ship as much hay as possible at such a critical time. We thank those who have shown support already and hope to see more support coming soon. Thank you.
Operator, do we have questions on the phone? Avons-nous des questions au téléphone?
Thank you. Merci. For questions, please press *1 on your device's keypad. Pour les questions, faites étoile 1 sur votre appareil. The first question is from Wyatt Sharp from the Wyatt Sharp Show. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Hi there. My question's for Minister Bibeau. Obviously, agriculture has been an interesting topic and one of great concern. You've mentioned climate change in your opening remarks. Obviously, climate change has been a big issue. It's been one of great concern with the wildfires across the country, and then obviously the flooding in British Columbia just recently, and in some parts of British Columbia still ongoing. So I'm wondering what can be done specifically to fight climate change and how you can work with agriculture leaders specifically to do so, because obviously they've been negatively impacted by some of the recent weather events.
Yes, thank you for the question. You're right. I mean, last year was especially loud in terms of sending us this very strong signal with droughts, with extreme heat, with floods. Well, we already knew that, and we have already started working on it. And I want to start by saying that for decades, if not for a century, I mean, farmers care for the environment, and they are doing as best as they can with the knowledge and the technology they have. So we are investing a lot in research and innovation. And like through our Living Labs initiative, for example, we are bringing researchers in the field to make sure that they are working on things that are very applicable in the field, and that this information is shared. We have also put in place a fund to bring direct financial incentives to farmers who will adopt more rapidly best practices such as rotational grazing, cover cropping. We are investing also in green technologies for barn heating, for grain drying, through precision agriculture. So it's more than $500 million that we have announced only last year on that type of measures.
Follow-up?
Oh, yeah, and so obviously you mentioned some of the economic impacts, but obviously the economic impact has been really big because the climate crisis has put them in a bad position, which has therefore put agriculture leaders in a bad position because, you know, they're not able to produce their product, which has obviously led to negative financial impacts on themselves. So how can you work specifically to ensure a strong economic recovery, and when you do get an economic recovery, work to make sure that, you know, this doesn't just keep repeating, so that you just have to kind of start from square one?
So we have to work on different fronts. One is through our business risk management program. So these are different type of insurance programs. One that will respond in the case that farmers have a significant reduction in their revenues. Another one will trigger when they have exceptional costs to face. Another one is directly related to crops. And so we have different type of programs for which we already have the authorities here at the federal level, but also with the provincial governments, because it's a 60-40 cost share program. The federal contributes 60%. So we have these type of tools quickly available to farmers when we're facing extraordinary situation. But as I said earlier, we also have a wide range of new programming support to help farmers be more resilient and reduce their emissions and contribute to the fight against climate change.
Opérateur, prochaine question. Next question.
Thank you. Merci. The next question is from Janet Silver from iPolitics. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
This is a question for Minister Bibeau, and thank you so much for taking our questions. There is a delegation from Prince Edward Island, as you know, that is in Washington today, meeting with senators, congresspeople, the ambassador. I'm just wondering, you are not with them. Are you on the phone with Secretary Vilsack? Are you planning a separate trip to D.C.?
I've had quite a few conversations with Secretary Vilsack directly. This is an issue that I follow extremely closely. In the same time with the BC flood, obviously. These are my two very top priorities. We are working as a Team Canada with the province, with the industry. There's a lot of work to be done, particularly on the scientific front with our experts at the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, because we know very clearly what the Americans are asking us to be reassured so we can reopen the market for PEI fresh potatoes. But in the same time, we are having different meetings, different calls through Minister Ng, my colleague, the Minister of International Trade, to our ambassador in Washington. The province is also doing is part of advocacy. And once again, we have our senior top officials and scientists working on this issue to resume trade.
Follow-up?
Minister, you said earlier this week that it was really difficult to give a timeline as to when you think this matter will be resolved. You just spoke about the scientists working hard. I'm just wondering, in terms of the information that the U.S. is requesting, in terms of a timeline, do you expect there will be some sort of you'll be able to reach an agreement with the U.S. counterparts before the end of the year, or do you expect this ban is going to go into next year?
I think it would be ambitious to think it could be solved by the end of the year, considering the date we are. But I can tell you that it's top priority. All our best scientists and trade officers are working on this issue. I am personally, my colleagues ministers are, the ambassador is, we have all hands on deck, and the province and the industry, and we are really working as a Team Canada on that, and we will do everything to resume trade of fresh PEI potatoes to the U.S.
Opérateur, prochaine question. Next question.
Thank you. Merci. The next question is from Dylan Robertson, the Winnipeg Free Press. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Hi there. Thanks for taking your questions today. I'd like to ask you both about the carbon tax on things like grain drying. Yesterday's fiscal update out was a refundable tax credit as of this past March, but the carbon tax was in place on these tasks before that. So I'm wondering if Ms. Robinson finds this timeline and the amounts set out in the fiscal update to be sufficient, and if Minister Bibeau can talk about how those targets were decided on.
I can start. So last year, for budget 2021, we had a commitment of $100 million to send back a portion of the money we are getting through this price on pollution, to send it back into the agricultural sector, to farmers. We are putting the final touch to the mechanism of this return right now. And in the fiscal update yesterday, we have reiterated our commitment for the coming years based on a more direct return. Do you want to add something?
Thank you. The Canadian Federation of Agriculture has been pointing out for a while now that farmers are natural solution climate change providers. So we're in a position to bring not only meaningful impact to the fight against climate change, but we're also producing food at the same time. So we're hopeful that what we're going to see is additional monies, because it's important to understand with farmers that we're at the bottom of the value chain in regard to passing along costs. So when we see additional costs come to us, we don't have an opportunity to pass that along down the line. So all of the additional increases we do see from the carbon tax that accumulates through the value chain ends up at our doorstep. We've been having a look at the numbers that came out yesterday, and well, I wouldn't be doing my job if I said we were happy about it. We need to see more. We need to see Canadian farmers in the same types of positions that we see our colleagues in the United States as well as in Europe. So we're hopeful that we will continue to have meaningful conversations with Madame Bibeau and her people and make it even better for Canadian farmers.
Follow up, then?
And on today's announcement, Ms. Robinson had mentioned some of the issues leading up to this. When the first round of funding ran out, people started going back to culling animals and selling off hay. So I'm just wondering, Ms. Robinson, what you make of the delay here, and Minister Bibeau, whether this was an issue with the election caretaker period that had caused this delay?
Thank you for the question. The delays that we saw, we're certainly in a caretaker mode at the beginning of this, and Madame Bibeau and I worked together, and we did bring the $1 million to the table, and that allowed us to get started. Obviously, as we make our way through this, it's important to recognize that the shortage well exceeds our capacity. We're never going to be able to move enough hay to save every animal in Western Canada. So we've been focusing on getting hay to farms that, number one, have water, and number two, have valuable breeding stock, because we're trying to mitigate the losses here. As we look forward to being in the recovery phase, we want to have the herd as robust as possible. So we know that there's 100 million pounds of hay that we could move, and the only thing holding us back from doing that is more funding. The $4 million announced today should see us through until hopefully March. And having a look at pastures in Western Canada, we're hoping that we're going to see animals in those pastures in June, but certainly those pastures suffered a lot of damage due to the drought. So we'll have to see how they recover. So it's not an easy answer, but it's important to note that Western Canada is enormous, and Canadians should be proud of how huge our landmass is and how productive it is and how well managed it is by farmers. So we're doing our best to save that breeding stock, and we hope to have more than 17,000 animals. We would love to stand here and say we've saved 117,000.
Well, I think Mary already responded to the question. So even during caretaker mode, we were able to move a first $1 million, and today we're here to add $3 million to it.
Operator, next question.
Thank you. Merci. The next question is from Amanda Stevenson. Please go ahead from the Canadian Press. Your line is open.
Hi there. This question is for Mary Robinson. So you said that 75 farms have received hay from the program already. Is there a waiting list? Like, I'm trying to get a sense of how many farms would like to receive this hay if they could, if the money was available.
I can't answer specifically about a waiting list. What we do has we've got a fantastic website that if you are in a position where you need to receive hay, or you're in a position where you can send hay, you go online and you fill in your details. We have staff that's compiling all that information. They have identified, as I said, 100 million pounds in Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes that we could ship west. And we know that the demand, it certainly exceeds that 100 million pounds.
Okay. And do you have a sense of how many cattle have been culled so far, like directly as a result of this drought in Western Canada? Or do you have a number for how many could be at risk of being culled as a direct result of this weather impact?
No, I don't.
Okay, thanks.
Operator, next question.
Thank you. Merci. The next question is from Geraldine Witters from the Manitoba Cooperators. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Good afternoon, Minister Bibeau and Ms. Robinson. My question is for Minister Bibeau related to Hay West and the drought aid in general. Given the hundreds of millions that have already been given or pledged toward drought aid, both short-term and long-term, here in my province toward feed and transport, why do you consider it necessary to donate another $4 million to drought aid, given how much has already been given?
Well, it's really a matter of making available feed for animals. We normally we trade north south more easily than east west on a regular basis. But now we are facing in the west, a huge drought, but also in the United States. So the natural channel of trade and exchange of hay is not available. And since the hay has to come from a further place from the east of the province, it represents a significant increase in the cost because of the transportation. So what we are subsidizing is really this extra transportation cost.
Follow up?
Okay, and then for Ms. Robinson, do I understand you correctly that you will be asking the government for more funding toward hay transportation?
We are definitely going to be seeking more funding until the year is over. It's our goal to save as many animals and have the greatest impact on improving the outlook for Western producers. The mental health implications of what people are going through right now, I don't think we can overstate how important this is as a heartwarming exercise. And I really encourage people to give some thought to that. These people in Western Canada have no other option. We saw so much of our hay shipped south earlier in this year, and it meant that they have no other inventory to look at. So it's our hope that we will secure more funding, both private, corporate, and as well from governments, so that we can see as much hay move, so that we can save as many animals as possible and make the biggest difference for Canadian farm families.
One further question for you, Mary. Can you give me any information about if hay has been sent to Manitoba, and if so, do you know how many farms in Manitoba have received it?
I do have those numbers. I don't have them off the top of my head, but I know the breakdown has been, I think, about 40% to Saskatchewan, 20% to Alberta, and the balance to Manitoba.
Operator, next question.
Thank you. Merci. The next question is from Neil Bellinger from CJWW Radio Saskatoon. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Question is for Mary Robinson. You mentioned that hay shipments had been delayed for about a month because of lack of funding. Now that you've had this funding, is there hay ready to go at this point, and how long do you think it will take to resume shipments?
So we've been waiting quite impatiently for this funding announcement. We have loads in the hopper ready to go. We have farms in Western Canada ready to receive it. So it's all lined up, ready to go. It's just a matter of when we pull the trigger, which is probably today. It'll just be a matter of how quickly those loads can be delivered.
So we're at 5.6 million pounds delivered so far. How much would you say is ready to go in the not too distant future?
Well, we have 100 million that people have notified us that they're willing to send.
Okay. And on, do producers in the West, do they put any money forward to help, for contributions for the program? I'm not paying, a market value, but is there any nominal fee on this end?
Yes, so every farmer in the West that receives hay pays the same per pound rate, and anyone in the East has the option of being paid for their hay, or we've had several producers in the East donate back that money that normally would go to them for having sold the hay, and that money in turn goes back into the transportation pot to send more hay west.
Next question.
Thank you. The next question is from Peter Mitham from Country Life in BC. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Thanks. So the minister had mentioned the flooding in BC, and I think wildfires were also mentioned in part of the conversation. And I realize the breakdown has been given on where the hay has gone, and it's mostly the prairies, but was just wondering if any of this funding will benefit farmers in British Columbia at all?
I'd like to share the backstory as to how we even got to the point where we have Hay West 2021. We had a board meeting in October of this year, and the conversation was focused around the impact of the drought on, we have a couple of beef farmers on our board, and everybody said we need to do something. So we came together and we started it. Since then, we've obviously seen massive devastation in BC. And BCAC, members of ours, we've certainly been in touch with them and are helping them champion some of the work they're doing to get some relief. And Minister Bibeau was out and visited personally, so incredibly heartbreaking there. We're well aware of the feed challenges as well as many other challenges producers in BC are facing, and we are definitely exploring the opportunity to send some more hay to BC.
No follow-up?
Yeah, okay. I didn't know if the minister was going to comment, but I do have a question then for the minister. Just in view of the $5 billion in recovery funding that was announced or tipped yesterday, was curious how much of that might be heading towards the agriculture sector here, and when we could hear a definite announcement, whether it would be before the end of the year or in January.
Well, we've put in place some kind of a joint cabinet committee with BC provincial ministers and federal ministers. We're about 8 of us from each government working very closely together to identify the priorities, the path forwards. And from this announcement, I would say that what would normally touch the ag sector would be everything related to food supply chain, and actually to supply chain also, because farmers need animal feed and various input. So everything related to the supply chain, the infrastructure associated to the supply chain will definitely have a direct impact on the agricultural sector. But having said that, I mean, there's a huge conversation that is still happening, and we will together identify the priorities in terms of rebuilding.
Operator, next question.
Thank you. Once again, please press star 1 on the device's keypad if you have a question. N'hésitez pas à faire étoile 1 pour toute question. The next question is from Alex from Western Producer. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Yeah, thanks. This question's for the minister. Can you say if there's going to be any shipping of beet corn into Canada from the U.S. Heading north?
No, I don't have this information.
And I guess another question for either of you is there a story that you've heard or an example of a particular farmer or rancher that's struggling that you'd like to share that kind of sums up the experience of Western ranchers?
Well, I've been traveling to the prairies, and particularly Manitoba, right in the middle of the drought, walking through the field with the farmers, seeing the bad crops that they had, the grasshoppers, the devastation, and I mean, it's extremely difficult for these families because they have invested not only for years, but for generations in their farm, in the genetics of their animals. And this is what it's so hard for them. So we want to be reassuring, we want to be there to support them and to help them get on their feet and restart. And we are working closely with the representatives of the industry. Mary, you might have stories to share.
Thank you, Minister. One person who comes to mind who's been very vocal and a strong advocate would be Bill Campbell, who is the president of the Keystone Agricultural Producers. And Bill shared stories with us early on, actually from that October board meeting, of seeing, very bony animals in the auction yard. And it gets pretty emotional, and it's difficult for people to talk about. So I think there are too many stories to share, and I think it's important instead for us to continue to focus on helping as much as we can.
And operator, do we have a last question?
Thank you. Yes, we do. It is from Marina von Stackelberg from CBC, Manitoba. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Hi there, Minister Bibeau. You know, we know yields of canola and wheat this summer were down more than 35%, and the Drought Monitor's latest numbers show 99% of the agricultural land on the prairies is abnormally dry or in a drought. You know, climate experts and farmers are saying the major concern is next season. So what is the federal government doing to set up farmers who are trying to grow those crops that they're going to be okay this coming season?
Well, as I said earlier, I mean, we're working on different fronts. We are investing on different streams as well. We have our business risk management programs in place, like agri-insurance to the crop insurance to support them when, you know, they face a difficult season. We are investing significantly in research and innovation and making sure that this new knowledge and technologies are made available to them. And we are also providing direct financial incentives or subsidy to help them adopt more sustainable practices or afford cleaner technologies as well.
Follow up?
I guess the thing too is that with these lower yields, we've seen year over year that the prairies traditionally creates more for the country. Are you concerned at all when we're seeing this huge reduction and the fact that the ground is so dry heading into this next season? Are you concerned about food security at all for our country when we know that this vast area of land is as dry as it is and might have trouble growing crops this season?
I would not say that I'm worried for food security in Canada. But of course, with the exceptional drought of this summer and not particularly wet for the seasons before, it's worrying that we might not have the same quality. But once again, this is why we have to keep investing in making sure that our agriculture is always more sustainable and that we can regenerate our soil. We are also working on major infrastructure projects, irrigation projects. We are putting in place the Canada Water Agency as well. So this is something that we have in our mind and we are working on to give our farmers the tools they need to continue be leaders in sustainable agriculture and continue to feed Canadians and feed the world.
Thank you. This concludes press conference.
Thank you.